rare and balanced view on politics in today's world. Based on facts, born of rationality, common sense, and logic, providing context on today's events. This is American Perspective with Rick Thomas.
Hello there, Whiskey Warriors. This is American Perspective. Welcome. And all guests and other folks that may be watching on X, formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, and just not stepping into the chats. And of course, my Rumblers as well, Rumble. And even over on YouTube. I actually picked up a couple people on YouTube. I went from 218 subs from 118 subs to 120 in the past couple of days. So there's been a couple new people over on the Screw Tubes that are watching. Well, that's cool. I appreciate all of you for coming. This is a fantastic night. The eve of Father's Day for those who are participating as fathers, grandfathers, etc. I'm actually I'm really lucky. My family is taking me to a new restaurant, new to me anyway. It's been around for a while, but every single time that we've tried to go there, you know, Mrs. Whiskey and I have tried to go there on date night, it's been packed. And now apparently all they do is take reservations. So somebody in the family, don't know who, but somebody in the family decided to make a reservation for us tomorrow. So that is fantastic for me. So I'm excited. I'm excited for it. It's kind of I don't want to say it's a man place, but it kind of is a man place. I mean, the title of it is Mammoth Burger. So you can just imagine how big the burgers actually are, or at least, well, in my dreams anyway. All right. So I see some of the usual malcontents, miscontents, miscreants, Neanderthal, whatever 3 Chevy always says on Rumble. In fact, let's hit Rumble up first. I see Buddy Weiser. I see Coco Dominky, Amy Jean Viner, 3 Chevy, of course. Bonnie is there. I also, I saw Outlaw Dogs earlier, as well as, yep, there she is. As well as Ms. T of Tex, who's actually jumping between there and Facebook. Hello to all of you. If I missed anybody, I apologize for that. Okay, Bon, send me an email, please. Bon. There we go. Send me an email. You know who you are. All right, over here on the Facebook, I can't forget, of course, Mark is over here on Facebook, although I did see him over on Rumble as well. And, of course, there's Tommy, like I said, slumming in both places. And as well as Becky, our Australian contingent. And, yes, you guys are rebels. Didn't you? I don't know if this is true, but supposedly, historically, Australia was a penal colony before it became a actual country. So there you guys go. You've got like, woohoo. Anyway. All right. So there we go. We have everybody, at least through the chat process that I see here. Okay, 3 Chevy, I'm going to hold you to that about the burgers being huge. So anyway. All right. So let's get on to tonight. Let's get it all kicked off. 4, of course, is, Mark, remind me of that. Remind me of that when it comes around to Friday. Remind me of that. Okay. So, do me a favor. If you are of mind, I think tonight is Judge Wild's version. So please, if you are of mind, please stand, remove your hat, put your hand over your heart, and join in with Judge Wild in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Judge. I know he isn't in the chat. He might be listening, though. He's not in the chat. I know he was transmitting earlier. So there you go with that. If you would like to get your rendition of the Pledge of Allegiance to be played here on the American Perspective Show, you can do so by recording yourself and then sending me the audio file. Go send it off to my email address of fans, F-A-N-S, at AmericanPerspective.online. That's fans at AmericanPerspective.online, and you can get that. I'll put you into the rotation. The rotation's getting a little more expanded, which is cool. I like it because it means that I don't have to regale you with my version all the time, because you listen, let's face it, you guys listen enough to me already. I don't need to be reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, let's get on with tonight's promotion. The IOTC, the Institute on the Constitution, was established in 2004 as a 501c3 nonprofit with one singular mission, and that is to restore the constitutional republic through grassroots education. All courses and materials are developed using primary source documents and taught from the American view of law and government as defined in the Declaration of Independence in the following 3 key points. 1, there is a God. 2, our rights come from him. And 3, the purpose of civil government is to secure and protect our God-given rights. The IOTC offers the opportunity to educate yourself on our most precious founding document, the Constitution of the United States. They also provide tools to educate your community and get involved with local government. Start by taking their free U.S. Constitution course and go from there. Use my affiliate link, iotc.americanperspective.online, to sign up. And while you are there, take a moment to look through their other course material and information. My affiliate link, once again, is iotc.americanperspective.online to get great content to learn about our historical founding and support the show in the process. That's iotc.americanperspective.online. Or if you would just like to purchase this fabulous Saddleback leather-bound U.S. Constitution to support the show, go to constitution.americanperspective.online. Take a look at this thing. It is an 1/8 of an inch of Saddleback leather wrapped around pages that are tear-resistant as well as water-resistant. And look at that binding. It is stitched, not glued, goes all the way through the leather to the other side. You can't get a better quality manufactured U.S. Constitution at all, anywhere. And they back it up with a 100-year warranty against materials and workmanship defects. If anything goes wrong with this thing, you can send it back to the manufacturer and they will either fix it or replace it for free. Go to constitution.americanperspective.online and get your copy of the Buddy Tested, Buddy Approved, Billy Tasted, Billy Approved, and the Youngest Whiskey Warrior has checked out the inside internal document to ensure that the information is correct to get you a civics badge in Scouts. Go to constitution.americanperspective.online and get yours today. Also, don't forget to go and check out the Institute on the Constitution for the rest of their wonderful, wonderful products. And of course, I thank them for allowing me to be an affiliate. Okay. So, tonight, my wonderful, loving Mrs. Whiskey went out, and because I made the comment the other night that I was out of Four Roses, she went ahead and grabbed me a Four Roses single barrel bottle earlier. I think it might have been last night. But anyway, there it is. That's what I'm drinking tonight. This is one of my faves for sure. And it is in the True Grit Roots Network. Old-fashioned rocks, glass, whatever you want to call it. It's in here. And I have, my whiskey stones inside there. Usually True Grit shows up on Wednesdays, but I kind of messed that up. I grabbed the wrong glass on Wednesday. So here it is for Saturday, making its first Saturday appearance. I'll tell you about True Grit later. But there you go. There you go. All right. Let's get our first segment going, which, of course, is On This Day in American History. And, of course, for On This Day in American History, we read from the American Patriots Almanac, written by William J. Bennett and John T.E. Cribb, chock full of all kinds of factoids and information for patriots such as myself who want to learn about our historical government, founding, country, flags, gosh knows how many other things there are in this whole situation. So here we go. For June 15th, some things the flag stands for. The Continental Congress assigned no specific meanings to the flag's colors in 1777. Now, pause that for just a second. We celebrated Flag Day yesterday, and as you know, there wasn't any reference to what the colors meant, just simply what the colors were. So here we go. When resolving that it should be red, white, and blue, Congress may have chosen those colors because they appeared in the British flag that flew over the colonies until the Revolution. But when Congress designed the Great Seal of the United States, it gave some indication of the symbolism of the colors. Charles Thomson, Secretary of the Continental Congress, stated that the seal's colors are those used in the flag of the United States of America. White signifies purity and innocence. Red, hardiness and valor. And blue signifies vigilance, perseverance, and justice. As every American student learns, side note, I don't think they do, at least not anymore. The flag's stars represent the states, while the stripes stand for the 13 original colonies. A book published by Congress adds that the star is a symbol of the heavens and the divine goal to which man has aspired from time immemorial. The stripe is symbolic of the rays of light emanating from the sun. In June 1917, as the country entered World War I, Woodrow Wilson said, "This flag, which we honor and under which we serve, is the emblem of our unity, our power, our thought, and purpose as a nation. It has no other character than that which we give it from generation to generation. The choices are ours. It floats in majestic silence above the hosts that execute those choices, whether in peace or in war. Yet, though silent, it speaks to us. It speaks to us of the past, of the men and women who went before us, and of the records they wrote upon it. From its birth until now, it has witnessed a great history, has floated high the symbol of great events, of a great plan of life worked out by a great people." And that is tonight's On This Day in American History. Now, considering Woodrow Wilson is one of the presidents that I think most people would say was one of the worst presidents in history, he's down there with Carter and Obama and Biden. Biden, of course, right now taking the first place in that award. But anyway, speaking of Mr. Biden, you'll remember or recall that I talked to you yesterday, and I mentioned that Biden has basically said that he would veto any bill that comes in with pay raises for the troops, for the enlisted troops. Well, the House has decided to test that. You can check this out. Oh my goodness, I thought this would come up, but apparently it wouldn't. Anyway, the House has decided to test that, and of course it has to pass the Senate, but the House passes an $883 billion annual defense bill, but they added a bunch of culture war amendments. Now, this is interesting. The final tally of the vote was 217 to 199, with 6 Democrats voting in favor and 3 Republicans voting against this. But here, just to give you an idea, here's some of the things that were in the past annual defense policy bill yesterday. So the House bill, or the bill, which has more than 1,000 pages, provides, of course, continued funding for military aircraft, ships, vehicles, weapons programs. It also includes a 4.5% pay raise for U.S. service members and about 15% in additional pay for some junior enlisted service members, bringing their overall pay boost to nearly 20% under this year's budget. Now, remember, they go through 2 years. It's every 2 years, so this has to be done. Well, this also was including things such as eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion positions within the Department of Defense, imposing a hiring freeze on all DEI positions in the Department of Defense. There's also a measure to block DoD funding for abortion-related expenses, another that bars the DoD from funding or providing gender transition surgeries and hormone treatments, as well as measures to prohibit the DoD's education arm from purchasing or displaying material that promotes radical gender ideology or pornographic content. Now, you would think that this would be logical. I mean, somewhat. I mean, especially considering that the far left has been pushing this. You would want your military to focus on things like, becoming the most efficient killing organization in the world again, to make sure that they can perform their duties at a high level of efficiency and accuracy and so on and so forth. Now, apparently, the House version also includes an amendment which was introduced by Representative Andy Ogles, he's a Republican from Tennessee, that prohibits the Pentagon from contracting with entities that have engaged in boycotts of Israel and would bar the department from selling products made by entities that boycott Israel at any of its commissary stores or military exchanges. Another amendment, which was introduced by Chip Roy in Texas, he's a Republican, of course, would block the DoD from allocating funds for various climate action-related executive orders issued by President Joe Biden. Well, of course, as always, because we have a split Congress, meaning that the House of Representatives is controlled by the Republicans and the Senate is narrowly controlled by the Democrats, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer immediately said that the House-passed bill will find zero traction in what's called the upper chamber, which is the Senate. He said, quote, in a statement, "The legislation coming out of the House today is loaded with anti-LGBTQ, anti-choice, anti-environment, and other divisive amendments guaranteed not to pass the Senate." Well, this doesn't surprise anybody who's paying attention to this stuff. He also continued and says, as we move forward with this year's NDAA process, both sides will have to work together to pass bipartisan legislation that honors and respects all who serve in defense of our nation. Now, the defense bill has traditionally passed bipartisanly because, again, keep in mind that that's like the primary reason for the government to exist. But now, especially because of the GOP's adding all of these amendments in there, it's basically viewed as poison pills by the Democrats. Now, the Senate version has $911.8 billion, but doesn't include any of the culture war amendments. Now, like the House, it does include support for military operations in Indo-Pacific, including Taiwan, a 4.5% increase for service members. But unlike the House, the Senate is requiring women to sign up for the Selective Service System, the U.S. draft program that hasn't been used since Vietnam. Now, keep in mind, Selective Service has been a strictly male. At the age of 18, you must sign up for Selective Service, but it has been strictly male. This is the first time, I believe, I could be wrong, but this is the first time I believe that it's been proposed that females get added into that mix. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about that, to be honest with you, especially because a draft usually means that we're going to war. I mean, it's not like we're drafting anybody in peacetime. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about that. We should continue with an all-volunteer Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Space Force. But at the same time, though, I'm kind of wondering how the Democrats are going to actually be able to explain what a woman is in order to understand who a woman or what a woman is, that whether or not they have to sign up in the Selective Service. I mean, I don't know. I haven't quite figured that out yet. I still can't figure out how the left seems to think that they don't understand what a woman is, because obviously they've got a Supreme Court Supreme Court activist on the court right now that couldn't identify what a woman was. Now, what happens, as always, you must keep in mind that whenever you have two conflicting bills like this, where you have the House creates a bill, the Senate creates a bill, but they're not like connected or on par with one another to where it would become a joint resolution. Now what has to happen is, especially because the House bill's been passed, the Senate and the House will have to come to some sort of an agreement with all of the amendments that have been proposed and figuring things out within all of those situations. So they're going to have to essentially true up the bill in order for it to become a setup for the National Defense, the NDAA setup. Now, of course, we still have that claim by Joe Biden that if it includes those raises for the enlisted folks, that he can veto it. Now, keep in mind and remember, veto itself, okay, a veto itself sends the bill back, but we don't have a veto-proof majority. So if Biden decides to veto this bill on those grounds and kicks it back, then we could be looking at a very long time for the defense to actually get funded. Now, this has happened before, where the military has been kind of in limbo when it comes to its budgeting process. So this is going to be, kind of a interesting thing to watch moving forward here. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to kind of keep in mind on this. But again, in my opinion, the this essentially this is like the top thing. Like I told you before, a full 1/3 of Article 1, Section 8 covers the military. And this is what should be covered. Well, the Democrats may think that there's a possibility. Oh, and by the way, too, the House Republicans also passed a automatic registration for males in the same bill. So it's not like they're looking away from the idea of using the selective service and keeping it in the draft. But realistically, these two bills are pretty much dead on arrival at the moment because I don't think they're going to come to a very easy, shall we say, compromise between the two. Speaking of compromises, this actually sort of surprised me, and I'm kind of surprised that I didn't see this in a bunch of other locations. You know how Joe Biden has been talking about the war in Ukraine, and of course I've been critical of it because of the fact that we really have had no off-ramp. There's been no suggestion of an off-ramp from this administration in terms of making the idea of a Ukraine war end. There's been no communication from the White House whatsoever in terms of what they should do in what they are suggesting as sort of a peace deal. Well, this showed up in the Epic Times, and I'm actually kind of surprised about it. Putin offers ceasefire if Ukraine surrenders eastern provinces. The Russian leader said a ceasefire was needed to achieve unity between Russia, Ukraine, and in Europe in general. Now, this is actually one of the things that I have already mentioned as a potential off-ramp in the past, and I'm not the only one. There's been several other pundits who have all kind of said the same general thing. Because of the fact that the Russian-Ukraine war seems to have come to a bit of a stalemate, it seems counterintuitive to just want to hand over everything in Ukraine to Russia. It also is counterintuitive to go to Russia and say, well, you have to back off and go to, the original borders and essentially give back the Donbass region and the Crimea region, which were taken before. Now, under Obama, by the way. Now, Putin is essentially putting out what I would consider a potential off-ramp for Zelensky. And he sort of, he promised this yesterday, and he's essentially saying that he promises to immediately order a ceasefire with Ukraine and begin peace negotiations if Kyiv agreed to withdraw all troops from the 4 regions that were annexed by Moscow in 2022. And, of course, renounce any plans to join NATO. He said, we are urging to turn this tragic page of history to begin restoring step by step the unity between Russia and Ukraine and in Europe and in general. Okay. Well, Zelensky immediately rejected, saying that it was a Russian ploy to trick Ukraine into surrendering territory where it still has troops. Zelensky said, what Putin demands is to give them part of our territories, those occupied and not occupied, talking about several regions of our country. So, to that end, Mr. Putin demands included Ukraine's full withdrawal from Kherson and Zapor. Oh, God, I'm not even going to read this thing. Where Russian forces have failed thus far to seize control of key population centers. So Ukraine is currently not being considered for NATO membership, although Kyiv has expressed interest in doing so. And I seem to recall a certain individual who went over there talking about, and I can't remember who it was, whether they're both slimy bastards, but I can't remember if it was our NSA guy or whatever. Anyway, one of them went over there and was saying that we should push to get Ukraine put into NATO. Anyway, the point that I'm making, though, is that at least there is a beginning of a start of a potential of a possibility of a peace agreement, maybe, sort of, kind of. I'm not exactly sure whether or not this indicates that Russia and Putin might be agreeing to the fact that, or thinking that, hey, we're wasting a lot of time, money, energy, and effort in all of this, and we're not really getting all that far. I think he was expecting to just kind of roll in and for the Ukrainians to just sort of roll over, and they haven't seemed to do that, at least not that we are aware of. But we're going to have to kind of see what comes out about this. Obviously, Ukraine joining NATO would have to, it would require unanimous approval by all NATO member states, including Hungary and Turkey, and they are unlikely to agree to that. So, I don't know. This is kind of interesting, an interesting development. I'm not exactly sure what it means in the long run, and what it would mean in terms of geopolitical outcomes. But at least we have a potential start of conversations in terms of an off-ramp, rather than just sending money over to Ukraine over and over and over again, and especially over the next 10 years, like Biden wants us to do, wants the U.S. to do. So we'll just have to kind of see what goes on with that. All right. Before I get into the next one, let me go ahead and tell you about True Grit Roots Network. TGRN, True Grit Roots Network, is a 24/7, 365, currently blues-only station. We're looking to expand, hopefully, in the near future. But I invite all of you to come, especially tomorrow, to come check out our lineup. Starting off at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, Central Time here in the U.S., is Oogie's Sunday Groove, where Oogie brings to you a nice, soft, and, shall we say, a spiritual, uplifting music to start your day. Then after Oogie's Sunday Groove, we move into Lady A's Gumbo and Gospel, where she continues the gospel line with her favorites in the blues genre. Then at 1 p.m., we switch over to the Queens of the Blues, where Gina Coleman takes you through a discussion regarding the females, the women that have helped make the blues what they are today. Then after that, at 2 p.m., we have Roots and Fruits. That's Vinnie Marini, where he talks about the songs that he appreciates and where their inspirations come from and have blossomed into, meaning that those are the roots and blossomed into the fruits of the tree. Then we continue with our playbacks of our encore presentations of our other shows like King Street Blues, Blues Therapy Radio, and From the Delta to Beale, All fantastic shows. Those all start at 4 p.m. Central Time and go all the way up till we switch over to the night train at midnight. Come and check us out, tgrn.net. You can listen right through your browser, or you can download our app and listen to us on your phone. Both iPhone as well as Android are offered. And you can also find us, if you don't want to download our app, you can find us in the Live 365 catalog of digital radio stations, as well as through iHeart and the Odyssey app, AUDACY, Odyssey. We're on all of those. You can find us all through there. True Grit Roots Network, tgrn.net, out of Austin, Texas. We thank you for the listen, of course. All right. So Biden is planning. I don't know how he can do this because, again, this is going to be kind of unconstitutional again. I mean, Biden has a habit of being unconstitutional. For an example, he had the, actually, this was Trump. Trump put in the ATF bump stock ban, which just got overturned. But the Biden administration tried to do things like vaccine mandates and shots through OSHA and all his student loan forgiveness for like billions of dollars and millions of borrowers, which that didn't go over very well in the Supreme Court. I expect this will likely to get overturned as well if it even tries to get implemented, because again, Congress is the one that's supposed to set this up. But here, the Biden administration is to announce a path to citizenship for illegal aliens next week. So he's going to go and announce some sort of a path, like they've been trying to do with DACA and all of these other people. He's trying to announce a path to citizenship for illegal aliens. Here's the thing. You want to become an American citizen? I guarantee you there's a real, it's not easy. Okay. It's not an easy path, but it's a simple path to become an American citizen. One, you don't enter the country illegally. That's your first step. Second, you come here with the idea that you are going to assimilate into our society with the idea that eventually you will become an American citizen. This is exactly what they need to understand. There's already a path in place. There's already a path for them to get in the country, but they don't want to wait. So here, this is 4 people familiar with the plan told CBS News the Biden administration is making plans to announce one of the largest immigration relief programs in recent history, developing a policy that would offer legal status to hundreds of thousands of aliens living in the country without proper documents, meaning illegal aliens. A program being developed by White House officials would offer work permits and deportation protection to illegal aliens married to U.S. citizens, as long as they have lived in the U.S. for at least 10 years, the sources said. They are requesting anonymity to talk about internal government plans. The proposal, which is known as parole in place, would also open up a pathway to permanent legal status and U.S. citizenship for some beneficiaries by removing an obstacle in U.S. law that prevents those who entered the U.S. illegally from obtaining green cards without leaving the country. Now, here's the thing. Once again, the Biden administration is attempting to create legislation using bureaucracies rather than going to Congress and having Congress amend or modify legislation to do the exact same thing. Now, this is absolutely nuts. Now, It's expected to be announced next Tuesday, and CBS reported that some Democrats have already been invited to the White House for it. If it does happen, it will be the biggest program for illegal aliens since President Obama announced DACA. Up to 1.1 million aliens who have U.S. spouses could be eligible. Somehow, leaking this news on a Friday doesn't suggest a lot of confidence on the White House's part that this will go over well. Well, of course it won't. Of course it won't. Now, what's interesting is that the ACLU filed a lawsuit last Wednesday challenging President Biden's decision to shut down the southern border to nearly all aliens seeking asylum in the United States. The action is the first legal challenge to an order that the Biden administration hopes will decrease the number of illegal border crossings. It won't. And neutralize one of the president's most serious political vulnerabilities. Won't do that either. Because that executive order really doesn't stop the flow of illegal aliens into this country. However, I'm not exactly sure how effective the ACLU is actually going to be on this because of the fact that, as I've already pointed out to you, immigration and naturalization already gives the president the power to close the border to any group or individual of aliens at any time, for any reason, for any length of time, as he sees fit. So, yeah. Now, they're saying that the ACLU has a real chance of winning that particular case. But I'm not exactly sure why. But in the statement, the ACLU said that the asylum ban, which went into effect 1 week ago, violated legal protections for people seeking protection in the United States. So it must have something to do with the way that the Biden administration crafted it, rather than just outright closing the border completely, which is he is perfectly within his power to do. So anyway, yeah, we're just going to have to kind of see how this thing works out. But Biden is literally a garbage president. He will always be a garbage president, and that's because he is too stupid to understand how to govern properly in the United States. Speaking of which, we have a potential of a very, very bad situation showing back up in this country. Do you remember? Well, some of us would remember the housing crisis, the mortgage crisis that happened in 2008 under Obama, where they had the whole Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac subprime mortgages crashing the entire mortgage industry and causing people to be underneath or underwater on their mortgages. Now, I fortunately was able to avoid that particular situation because of the fact that my property was not, I was smart, hopefully smart enough to not have my property mortgaged to the hilt to have that happen. However, Joe Biden has got this new housing scheme hatching. And according to this piece in Hot Air, we could be looking at another 2008 mortgage crisis under this thing. Here's the thing. It was only 17 years ago, this reading from the piece in Hot Air again, it was only 17 years ago that subprime mortgage crisis torpedoed the economy and sent the financial markets into the biggest tailspin since the Great Depression. Millions of Americans lost their jobs. One of the matches that was lit the bonfire was Freddie Mac and its cousin Fannie Mae offering generous taxpayer-guaranteed mortgage insurance to risky borrowers on loans with low down payments. It all blew up in the faces of the taxpayers, even though the Washington experts said the chances of these mortgages going bust and taxpayers taking a loss was less than 1 in 1,000. Well, we knew that's wrong. Okay. But here we go again. Now, of course, the biggest bailout went not to the Wall Street banks and the investment companies, but to Fannie and Freddie. So here's the latest scheme by the Biden administration to encourage families to borrow more money by using the equity in their homes as collateral. Home equity loans are often very risky. If prices fall, home equity can become negative. There's nearly $18 trillion in home equity, and it's one of the largest sources of savings and ownership for American families. Okay, let me take a second and let me explain how this works. You have your loan. For those of you that don't own a house, I'm speaking specifically to you in terms of how this works. You have a loan. You purchase the house. You agree on a price. That price is then financed. Okay? You have that loan. That loan amount that you owe gradually comes down, albeit a little slower if all you do is make the minimum payments. But you make those payments and it gradually brings the total cost of the loan down a little bit. But there's this little thing called interest. So in your first several years of owning a home, almost the vast majority of the money that you are spending is actually going towards your insurance and your interest payments. Okay, because most of us have primary mortgage insurance. In other words, ensuring the fact that if you default on the loan, the bank is still going to get their money. Okay. Now, that being said, all right, what you have as equity is the difference between what you owe and what your house can reasonably be sold for on the market. Now, that evaluation of what's reasonably considered in terms of the money is based on things like appraisals, and it is very subjective. For those of you that watched the Trump trial with Judge Engoron, where he basically freaking, said that Trump overvalued his value, that was a bunch of bullshit. And this is why, is because of the fact that the valuation on your home is very subjective. It is usually taken into account with regards to what they call comparables, other houses in your area that are roughly the same square footage, roughly the same number of bedrooms and bathrooms, roughly in the same condition as what you have, roughly the same size lot. There are several things that go into an evaluation known as an appraisal of how much that house is worth. Now, sometimes appraisals can be high, sometimes they can be low. Sometimes they can be way off base. But the fact of the matter is that this is how the real estate market runs. And in order for you to get an equity loan, you have to go through an appraisal. Now, if the value on your house tanks after that appraisal, okay? And did I not mention, Bonnie's pinging me in Rumble, did I not mention square foot? Because it is also off of square footage. If I didn't mention that, it's also off of square footage. But the point is, if that appraisal is way too high, like the value on the house in any given market, now keep in mind, that same market is not the same across the country. It's even different from region to region. Okay, so help me if I'm not explaining this correctly, and please correct me if I'm not explaining this correctly, but this is basically how this works. And so that appraisal, when it comes in, if the market tanks, that appraisal is over the actual retail price that you would potentially get from a prospective buyer down the road. Now, what ended up happening in 2008 is people mortgaged themselves up to the hilt, meaning that what they did is they took the value of the property. Let's say the value of the property was $400,000. Their original loan was $200,000. They took out an equity loan of another $180,000 as an example. And now you're looking at $380,000 on a loan when the house itself was only valued at $400,000. Okay. And if that value drops, so it drops down to say 300 or 325, you are essentially paying on a loan that house is no longer worth that value. And so you can't sell it because you can't get the money back, and you're basically stuck. And so what ended up happening is a lot of these homes where people couldn't pay their mortgages, they ended up to where they lost their homes. They ended up foreclosing. The bank would take it, offer it up in auctions, so on and so forth. And it was just a big and complete mess. So, here's the problem. Joe Biden is trying to tell everybody to go and do that same thing again. And unfortunately, we're in a position where a lot of people may have to do this in order to be able to make ends meet and pay bills off because of Bidenomics. So his intent here is to stimulate spending by putting more cash into the hands of consumers so they can, of course, rush out and spend it, preferably before the election. He thinks that this could be a way that could provide extra cash to homeowners at a time when Americans actually need to be saving and spending down debts, not spending. Now, Bank of America believes, according to the piece, Bank of America believes this scam could result in $1.8 trillion in government-insured home equity loans. This is the homeowner equivalent of the student loan forgiveness program. There's another problem, according to the piece. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were created to promote home ownership, not to juice government spending. A home equity loan achieves the opposite by depleting a family's ownership stake in a home. In other words, we now have the Biden administration encouraging Americans to have less home ownership. This is scary. I mean, this is an indication, honestly, of how this administration doesn't understand what is going on in the economy and is trying desperately in any way, shape, or form that it can to try and fix this before November of 2024. I'm going to tell you right now, folks, not that I'm a financial expert in any way, shape, or form, but if you can avoid it, make sure you do not go and leverage your home's equity up to the hilt. That is incredibly dangerous to do. And that is betting a lot on something that potentially could crash. Now, I came close. The value of my house at the time in 2008 was close to where its actual value came in. My loan, I should say, the value of my loan was just underneath the value that was coming in when it was appraised at its lowest value. But you've got to be smart. We must be smart about this. This is heading toward a potential destruction, even more so, of our economy. And Kamala Harris, our wonderful VP, who is trying to revitalize her likability ratings and stuff. I got something on that here in just a few minutes. But let me just tell you that she is attempting to revitalize her image by offering first-time homeowners $25,000 toward the down payment of the home. Now, this out of Woke Spy. Vice President Kamala Harris wants to give first-time homeowners $25,000 for a down payment, plus $400 a month toward mortgage payments. But there's a catch. The eligible candidates must be the first generation in their family to buy a home in order to secure the $25,000 grant. Now, keep in mind, do you see that word? It's a grant, meaning that it's not a loan, meaning that it doesn't need to be paid back. This is just simply $25,000 in taxpayer dollars that are being handed over to these first-time homeowners. In addition, a, quote, certain tranche of folks will also receive the $400 a month to help pay their mortgage cost. Now, again, keep in mind, this is a grant. This is not a loan. This is not something that needs to be paid back. This is basically the government just handing out free money. Now, let's be honest here, because this is seriously just pandering for what is believed to be Black Americans, because she announced it in front of a bunch of people where they had this big sign behind her. I don't know if anybody can see on rumble.com. Go to rumble.com American Perspective and you'll be able to see it. You can watch the video there. But there's she's on a stage. She's on the far right in the red. And she is basically saying economic opportunity for all, which is not for all. It's for some. Okay. But not for all. Anyway, then one of the people on X, Mark Lamprecht, pointed this out. He posted on X, the sign says for all, but her words say for some, which is true. And then he says, where are all the folks going to find these $91,000 homes? Here's how he breaks that down. With a monthly mortgage payment of $400. Now, of course, keep in mind, this is like the bare minimum. With a monthly mortgage payment of $400, a 30-year loan at 6%, because keep in mind, we're dealing with today's interest rates. With a $25,000 down payment, the maximum home price that you're going to be looking for is around $91,000, almost $92,000, $91,717. So that is, decent math. That's decent math about this whole thing. But of course, that's assuming that nobody else is pitching in or adding any kind of money in it. But let me ask you this. If you go and take a look, because I've kind of looked around at times, and you go and take a look, a decent house, a decent home price in most places where people are going to want to move to. In other words, places that are going to have things like jobs and that kind of stuff that you would want for family to be able to support your family. You're looking at least $250,000 for a home, for a decent home. There's not a single house that I am aware of anywhere, even in some places that I have looked that's like in the backwoods of, they're at least in the six digits. They're at least in six figures, 100,000 or more to get you a place. This is not necessarily a great thing. It sounds like a great thing, but it's not necessarily a great thing. And this is just incredible that they're marketing this and they're putting this up in front of them. So here, another person on X, Fugitive Mama, put out on a $500,000 house, which is starter in her area at 7.7%. This means a white adult will have a mortgage payment of $180 a month more than a minority prior to the $400 a month subsidy. So $580 or more discrimination charge for being white, which is exactly what this is. Yeah. And a person on X called Mr. Reagan said, so they're just openly buying votes now. And Jake Avra, AVRA, says exactly what I think. Hear me out. Work on lowering inflation instead of pumping more money into the economy, which, remember, the more money gets pumped into the economy, the higher inflation goes. When you have too much money chasing too few goods, that's what creates inflation. And he continues here. He says, pumping money into the economy via down payment assistance and monthly mortgage payment assistance subsidies. So, yeah. Now, the last question that comes from the article is whether or not any of this is actually legal, which at this point, I don't think anybody's really dug in, but none of that really matters to the administration. They don't really, they don't care. They don't care. So, yeah. Anyway, so again, once we have the administration pandering for specific votes to try and get things going. And of course, Kamala Harris was the one that had to announce it. And I'll explain why here in just a second, why she had to announce it. So gearing up for the Independence Day celebration, you really should go and check out theflagshirt.com. And they have guaranteed delivery for Independence Day right in here, right now. You should absolutely go to theflagshirt.com and go check out. They have a special section. Now they call them 4th of July outfits. We know that is Independence Day. So you should definitely go and check out theflagshirt.com. They have got patriotic selections for men, women, kids, and accessories, all setting up for the absolute best birthday ever, which is the birth of our grand country that we live in, this fantastic, just awesome nation that we live in. I wear their shirts. I wear the flag shirt cotton polos every single broadcast. So I can tell you from experience, they are great fitting, comfortable. They are true to size, at least for the men's size. Go to theflagshirt.com, and I'm going to throw in a little extra bump for you. If you head off, before you head off to theflagshirt.com, if you head off to flagshirt.americanperspective.online and grab yourself a coupon code for $5 off your order that you put in at checkout, head on over to theflagshirt.com after you pick up that promo code. And when you go to checkout with your order, get an extra $5 off on American Perspective. Go to flagshirt.americanperspective.online to get that code, and you can enter it in at checkout at theflagshirt.com and get yourself $5 off that order. Go to theflagshirt.com and get yourself patriotized. All right. So, Kamala Harris announced that wonderful thing, and she's, of course, the cackler. She tried to, I can't even come close to like imitating her cackle. It's just so bad. But anyway, the point is that her popularity is apparently plummeting just like Joe's is. According to this piece in Town Hall, she needs a revamp too of her image. So a Politico morning consult poll. Now, for those of you that don't know, Politico is the left organization of the mainstream media. They are so far left, it's not even funny. In fact, you read the Politico playbook to find out what is they on their minds for coming up for the day. But they found that Kamala Harris has a net disapproval rating of 52 to 42%, with the majority doubting that she would even have a chance to win the presidency if she were the Democratic nominee. So that's very key, because if the Democrats in a Democrat poll are all saying that, hey, we don't even think that she would win if she became the Democrat nominee, if we were to poll Biden and give put her in place, we don't even think she would win then. That's a big, big problem. That's a big problem. Just 3 in 5 Democrat voters said that they would vote for the vice president, with only 25% of independent voters saying that they would cast their ballot for her. 51% of voters believe that Harris would make for a lousy president and believe that she should be replaced as Biden's right hand. Only 39% said that she should not be replaced as the vice presidential nominee. Harris's popularity among voters, including Democrats, will have President Joe Biden's ticket looking sad at the polls in November. During her first year as vice president, her approval rating was just 28%, making her the least popular vice president in U.S. history. Yeah. Now, of course, the Democrats claim that it's because of the fact that she is black and female. It's a bunch of bullshit. She is just a absolute horrible word salad individual. She can't even get a sentence out correct. She is almost as bad as Joe Biden, but at least we can understand the words that come out of her mouth. We may not understand the meaning behind it, but she at least can enunciate the words that are coming out of her mouth. She is absolutely horrible. Why the Democrats tied themselves to these two, I have no idea. But she, realistically, I mean, in my view, if they tried to pull Joe Biden and put her in, sorry, had to wet my whistle. If they pulled Joe Biden and put her in, and she probably wouldn't get pulled anyway, because we all know Democrats love the intersectionality stuff. I mean, that's exactly what happened with, Karine Jean-Pierre, the absolute worst press secretary in the history of White House press secretaries. But for her to get in, I don't think she would make it. I don't think she would have a chance against the Trump train. Oh, this is setting things up. Things are going to look really interesting at the debate in a couple of weeks. Well, it's not only polls about Kamala Harris, by the way, that is causing some serious problems. Okay, so 538. Now, 538 is not a right-leaning pollster company, okay? But according to this piece in the Post-Millennial, 538 is now projecting Trump to be the winner of 2024. Now, keep in mind, again, I keep telling you this, you cannot take a singular poll as an outlier or as a definitive answer in terms of all of this. Polling, for the most part, is designed to be used as an indicator of trends. We don't want to actually take the individual polls as the de facto answer to things, but we need to make sure that we put them all together and use them as sort of an averaging strategy. And this is essentially why this is such a big deal, because 538 projecting Trump the winner of 2024. Yeah, this is a bit of a problem for the Democrats. Early in the afternoon, Trump was winning 50 out of 100 times. So they were 50 out of 100 with Trump on their projection forecast. But that was early on in the afternoon, where Biden was winning 49 out of 100 times in their simulations. But in a 2 p.m. update, Trump's lead grew, with the former president winning 52 out of 100 times and Biden winning 48 out of 100 times when the simulation was run. So of the 1,000 simulations that they did using averaging and polling across the board, Trump came out on top in 509 of them, while Biden won in 487. There was no winner in 4 of the simulations, according to this. Now, 538 states that its forecast is based on a combination of polls and campaign fundamentals such as economic conditions, state partisanship, and incumbency. It's not meant to quote unquote call a winner, but rather would give you a sense of how likely each candidate is to win. So this is, according to Charlie Kirk, this is the first time that Trump has actually led in any of the three campaigns that he's done for president. This is the first time that he's actually led in these 538 simulations. Yeah, so don't take this. I mean, seriously, just take this at face value. Do not try and assign any sort of victory lap over this. Just understand that the trends and things are slowly changing. And by slowly, I also mean this poll that came out. This was in the National Pulse, that maybe the kids, meaning the younger generation, Gen Z, are actually all right. So in the piece, poll after poll indicates young voters are warming to Donald Trump for 2024. The question is whether or not they are coming around to his policies, or has Biden just driven them away? And it's suggested that it could actually be both of them. According to the latest New York Times polling, young voters ages 18 to 29 prefer Biden by just 2 points, 47 to 45. The latest Quinnipiac poll has Trump beating Biden with young voters ages 18 to 34, 48% to, I think that's supposed to be like 45%. But anyway, for perspective, just to give you an idea, in 2020, Joe Biden took the youth vote by 24%. A Republican has not won the youth vote since 1988. 1988, just to give you an idea. So there's a potential, and if this is just a start of a trend, by the way, which we've seen it. We've seen it in the black vote. We've seen it in the Hispanic vote. We've seen it even in some other demographics. If this is just an example of a trend, we could be looking at a very, very good November in 2024. Okay. So, yesterday, it was announced that the Supreme Court knocked down the bump stock ban that was actually put in by the ATF under Trump, by the way. So Democrats, as soon as that was announced, the Democrats just took onto social media and they started just hammering gun control, because that was one of their special things that they, of course, talk about over and over and over again. Is they want an assault weapons ban, they want gun control, they want to take away all your guns. They don't overtly say that out loud, but that is essentially their idea, because in their mind, civilians should not own guns, period. However, that bump stock ban, which I explained to you last night, was actually done unconstitutionally, and the Supreme Court didn't strike it down because of the fact that it was a Second Amendment issue. They struck it down because the ATF overtly put it in place without subsequent or following up legislation from Congress. Now remember, we have a separation of powers. Congress is the one that must create the legislation, and the executive branch, which has overreached more often than not that I can remember in the Biden administration. But the executive branch is to execute those orders. They are not supposed to modify, change, add to, create their own laws and legislation. And that is exactly what the Supreme Court did. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, well, that's a Second Amendment issue, blah, blah, blah. No, it's because of the fact that the Biden administration, or actually in this case, the Trump administration, overstepped its bounds, created a new rule, and it wasn't a part of the original legislation. Now, that being said, fast forward a little bit to here and now. If you recall, the Biden administration had the ATF create a new rule that was expanding the definition of what's considered a gun dealer. Now, I talked about this on the program, and I know Bongino talked about it as well, where it expanded the definition of a gun dealer to make it to where now, if you even did a private sale from like father to son or something along those lines, you would have had to get an FFL license in order to make that transfer. You couldn't just hand your weapons off to a relative or a friend or anything else in terms of a private sale. It was expanding the idea that that any gun sale had to be done by a licensed dealer. Now, the whole purpose of this, of course, according to the Biden administration, was to close loopholes. In their terms, it was the gun show loophole, which doesn't exist. Don't jump all over me, but the gun show loophole does not exist. If you go to a gun show and you are going and buying from a reputable dealer, you have to go through the background check and all of that stuff, and follow the FFL and, FFL laws and all of that other stuff. But this came out, and I see this going to the Supreme Court also. A federal judge blocks the ATF rule expanding the definition of gun dealer. So a federal judge in Texas has blocked the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, colloquially known as the ATF, from implementing its new rule, which critics say dramatically expands the agency's enforcement scope by redefining who is a gun dealer. In his opinion, handed down on June 11th, U.S. District Judge Matthew Kacsmaryk for the Northern District of Texas said the enforcement of the new rule relies on highly problematic presumptions that will trigger civil or criminal penalties for conduct deemed unlawful just yesterday. Yep. The rule in question was unveiled in April as a part of President Joe Biden's effort to close what he called loopholes in the federal gun background check system. Now, keep in mind, again, the federal government, the executive branch, even if there are loopholes, the executive branch can't do anything until the Congress goes and corrects the problem. Anyway, so the new ATF rule declared that a person no longer has to make a living selling guns to be considered engaged in the business of selling guns. And this is what I was telling you just a second ago. Instead, someone who sells or offers to sell just one singular gun with the intent to predominantly earn a profit may be deemed an unlicensed gun dealer under the new rules and will be required to be registered with the federal regulator and conduct background checks on potential customers. So he has this judge has blocked that rule. And that's cool. I like it. I do. I like it. I like it a lot. Because, again, this is the executive trying to legislate from the bureaucracy, which we all know isn't constitutional or allowed. All right. So, one other thing, and of course, keep in mind that all of these gun rules that keep coming up the right and the left keep kind of arguing back and forth over the idea that Hunter broke those laws with his gun charges. And, you know, how can Joe Biden, this is a bad look for Joe Biden going around and talking about gun control when his son has been tried and convicted of his gun charges for lying on his forms about being a drug user. Speaking of lawsuits and Hunter Biden in particular, remember that pesky little thing known as the Hunter Biden laptop? And how he, you know, the left, if anybody was watching, the left just celebrated over the fact that Hunter Biden brought a lawsuit against Rudy Giuliani because he claimed that Rudy manipulated the data on the hard drive. And he claimed that Rudy Giuliani obtained that information illegally and so on and so forth. Well, now that he's gone through his gun charge, where, by the way, the laptop was used and entered into evidence, Hunter Biden has now dropped his lawsuit against Giuliani. So he was suing Giuliani, saying that the former mayor manipulated the data. Well, he can't claim that anymore. So he's freaking given up the laptop now. All right. So all of you people who've been pounding me on social media saying that the laptop wasn't real and that the image was manipulated by Giuliani and all of these other things, guess what? Double-barreled, not so family-friendly middle finger here, folks. It's real. The image was real. The information on it was real and expected, by the way, to be a part of his tax evasion case that's coming up in September in California, folks. Okay? This is exactly where this is going to go. I'm really excited to see that tax evasion case because they've actually called, as I said in the program before, they've actually called Hunter Biden a lobbyist, which of course sets you right up for the whole FARA charges and FARA violations. And yes, Bonnie, I did do a Bongino. I'm going to steal that from Bongino. I think I have a right to do that. I don't think Dan would mind. But anyway, so go to hell, libs. The laptop's real. The information's real. The information that's being presented in Congress, because that was one of the other arguments that they've had over the congressional hearings and everything else. All of that's real because they've pulled many of the data, the text messages, the emails, all of that stuff from the Hunter Biden laptop. So you can kiss my lily white butt for that. And yes, it is lily white because it doesn't see the sun. Anyway, okay, that's a little too much information to work with. All right, let's see. One last article here. So you remember how I was talking not too long ago about the destruction of the dollar and the fact that the dollar being used as a, yeah, thanks, Coco. Kiss my grits. How the dollar was being devalued in the world market and how the dollar used to be what was considered the de facto standard for what do we call it? International trade for that. Okay. Well, now this is not a good thing. So not only did Joe Biden get a devaluation of our credit rating and so on and so forth, well, now Saudi Arabia, according to the Daily Fetched, has ditched the U.S. dollar as its oil reserve currency, calling it the petrodollar. Saudi Arabia will not renew its 50-year petrodollar agreement with the United States as it moves toward an alliance called BRICS, which includes, by the way, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. Now, for those of you that don't know, China has been trying to push the dollar off as the de facto petrodollar in the world. And so now what they've done here is they've successfully been able to do it because Saudi Arabia has decided that they're not going to renew it. Yeah. U.S. dominance on the global stage will soon come to an abrupt end. And it's no surprise with 81-year-old Joe Biden being openly mocked by the rest of the world. Now, just think about what this is going to happen. Okay? Just think about what this is going to happen with this. All right? The dollar was used as the de facto currency for international trade because of its stability, because of its commonality across the world. If Saudi Arabia kicks this to the curb, our economy is going to be seriously affected. Not to mention most of the economies across the world, because a lot of them use the dollar as their de facto common currency when dealing with international trade. This is a huge deal. This is a huge deal. I don't even understand. I mean, and nobody's talking about it as of yet. But believe me, this is a huge, huge, huge deal. We're going to have to track this and watch this very, very carefully. Now that Saudi Arabia has essentially said that they are not going to renew this, Joe Biden is basically destroying our economy very, very quickly, very, very easily. And yeah, we're going to have a bit of a problem with this. Seriously. I don't know how this guy cannot be continued. Yeah. Yeah. And Buddy, yes, I did say, he said no to the illegal bump stock ban. It's illegal because of the fact that the ATF put it in place. It has nothing to do with whether or not it was considered a Second Amendment violation yet. They basically just said that the ATF couldn't create law. They needed to enforce law. That's pretty much all they said with it. All right. So speaking of Buddy submitted, of course, tonight's question of the week. All right. And Buddy puts over here, he says, "Greetings, my friend. I hope this communication finds you well and with stout spirits." Well, I have 4 roses tonight, so I think I'm good. Thank you for that. He continues, "Here is my inquiry. How can the process known as eminent domain be legal or constitutional?" And he's thrown down the gauntlet saying that I can't use a couple of specific terms. He's giving me 500 bonus points if I don't use those specific terms. All right. So here we go. Here it is. First of all, the concept of eminent domain comes from the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. Okay. Now, let me read the Fifth Amendment. It is only 1 paragraph long. And where it states it is down at the end. It basically states that a individual, I'm not going to read the whole thing. Let me just read the part that is pertinent to the conversation. It said, "A individual shall not be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation." Now, it is that concept, the whole idea of the taking of property for public use without just compensation, that has turned into what we commonly refer to as eminent domain. Now, eminent domain, for those of you that don't know, is essentially the government deeming that a private piece of property is better off and should be used as some sort of public use or for the public good. Oftentimes what this does, and no, I didn't violate your little challenge here. I'll take exception to that. But one of the things that they commonly use eminent domain for, which is things like roads, railways, public parks, those kinds of individual items that are deemed by the government as being part of or being used for public use. Now, it didn't always be that the public use of a particular property had to be proven, okay? However, over time, with the amount of time that people are, that people have had and been railroaded, let's say, by the federal government and even state governments, with the idea of things like public use and taking away private property. The point here is that what is supposed to happen is that public use, any property that is deemed to be decidedly taken under eminent domain for public use, has to be compensated at its what is considered its fair market value. Now, who considers what fair market value is? Well, again, this kind of goes back to the whole thing with appraisals on a house. Fair market value could be anything, realistically. But that's the purpose of the eminent domain, is that they would seize property, paying for it first, ideally, with the idea that it would be turned over toward public use. Now, there is a concept where if the property owner and the government can't come to an agreement in terms of what would be considered the just compensation or fair compensation for it, that the government can then use what is oftentimes considered the shall we say, the club of condemnation in order to acquire said property instead of paying for the fair market value. And that is where things would go into play. Like when the railroads, for an example, when the railroads were being built coming west, there was a lot of that type of thing going on where the representatives would come in and they would try to pay property owners under market value, claiming that it was fair market value, but it would be under market value for a piece of property in order to acquire it for the right of way for the railroad. But in reality, what ended up happening in a lot of places is the railroad would actually go much farther and try to gain right of way, at least in some places. They would try to gain right of way in places where the railroad wouldn't even show up. And so a lot of that was done via either, hey, you either pay or we condemn your property and take it anyway. And so that's kind of where the concept of eminent domain has come into play. Now, the chances of you actually winning like an eminent domain case, you would have to have the government would have to prove without a shadow of a doubt that the acquisition of your property is good for the public use and not for just, for them to have it. And there's also even some questions where things get a little, shall we say, hinky if the government acquires a piece of property and then hands it over to a private entity for pennies on the dollar for them to do something with. So there's still some legal wrangling and mumbo jumbo with regards to eminent domain, but the fact remains that eminent domain is part of the Constitution. It is so far constitutional, even though it may seem unfair. It is constitutional, and the general rule of thumb is that the government has to demonstrate that the acquisition of said property is really for public use. Hopefully that answers your question, sir. If you want to get a question in on for the Saturday segment question of the week, please do so by sending it to fans, FANS, at AmericanPerspective.online. That's fans at AmericanPerspective.online. And I will do my best to research and provide you with an answer if I don't already know it off the top of my head, of course. That concludes our show. I am a little over time. I do apologize for that, but that concludes our show. Do me a favor. If you haven't already, head on over to rumble.com, get yourself an account. It's free. And once there, look up the American Perspective channel and make sure you hit that green follow button. Also, if you are on Rumble, make sure you hit that thumbs up before you take off, because that helps to launch this video and my channel up into the leaderboards on Rumble. I do appreciate that for certain. You can also like this video on other platforms. I see that. Like I said, thank you for the additional 2 that showed up on YouTube. I do appreciate that. We will see you Monday. Everybody have a great Father's Day. If you have an opportunity to have your father in this world, make sure you say thank you for all that he has done for you. And also, if you are a father, happy Father's Day. And we will see you all Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on the American Perspective channel. Good night, everybody.
The previous broadcast was produced and is owned by Active Eye Media LLC. All rights reserved.